G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder. Recently, I've been spading the new Swedish tanks, and honestly, it has been stressful, not gonna lie. However, there are a few standouts, and you're looking at one such standout. This is the PV-KV2. No, not the KV2, not Big Strong Ivan Blyat KV2, but a Swedish one instead. It does have a derpy gun, although it is derpy because it's big and fat at 3.3. It's about as comparable to a ZIS 30, but at 3.3 with a Panzer IV gun. It is basically a Panzer IV gun, maybe with an extra 30 or 40 millimeters of vertical pen, but realistically, it makes up for that with a longer reload. The PV-KV2 is on what I believe to be a Panzer 38 chassis, and they've just simply chucked a funny looking AA turret on it, given it some armor piercing, and called it a tank. And you know what? That sounds pretty fun to me. This thing combines mobility with a decent gun, and one of the first decent turreted tanks in the entire Swedish tree. The PV-KV2, for me, is the first tank that you really get a bit of relief from, after, of course, the derpy cannon at 1.7, and the IKV, I think it's the 103. I'm not really sure. It's the low tier one. Maybe it's the 71. I can't remember the number, but it's pretty good. This thing is also fairly outstanding. It seems to combine that really, really nice sort of combination, if you will, of gun and mobility and firepower. The Swedish tanks before it tend to have really piddly guns, tend to have pretty decent mobility, but don't really have anything else to show for it. There's not a whole lot that you can really do with the earlier Swedish tanks, and this is the first one where you start to really get into the fun. Of course, you have to research the best shell first. It wouldn't be War Thunder, wouldn't it? This shell is the one that you're looking at right now that is on the bottom of the screen. It is the armor-piercing ballistic cap shell with explosive filler in it, and it is so much more of a relief than the other one. The armor-piercing shell, sort of just a flat armor-piercing, is fairly underwhelming, to be honest. It is a 75mm armor-piercing, so I wouldn't really be expecting the world from it, but at the same time, it's your stock shell for basically 4 tiers worth of research. It's really, really difficult to do well with that shell, and as soon as you unlock the nice shell, it is phenomenally better. First thing I would like to add before I even talk about the gameplay is this shell should be a tier 1 modification, straight up. Now, back to the gameplay. You can see I'm getting strafed by a plane, and this is going to be all too common in these open-topped Swedish tanks. It's just, I guess, a fact of life. What is also a fact of life is BT-7s, and more planes. This is starting to get a little bit frustrating for me, because at this point in the grind, I haven't had any luck. I haven't had any really good standout games, and this was the first real standout, if you will, that I managed to get my hands on. Obviously, the little meme cannon at 1.7 was pretty good, and as you can see, I'm staring down this BT-7, and he doesn't really know what's good for him. So I'm going to take aim as soon as the cannon is reloaded in 20 seconds, and I'm going to hopefully smite him into the dust, because after all, puny little Russian BT-7 doesn't deserve to be in Vosenak in Hurtgen Forest at all. You can see he's turning around, and what I'm going to give a shot at is maybe I can pop it into his turret, because he's got 2 crew in the turret. I should be able to easily finish him off, but I miss, because I'm bad. Now, at one point you might say, yeah, you do suck, and I would agree to that. I do suck in these tanks, and in fact I'm not the best of players, but the shell velocity is really, really difficult to get used to, and obviously being a new tech tree, no one's had experience with this gun before, because it has, quite frankly, not existed in the game before this. So, getting used to it is a little bit of a challenge, and that's something that you're going to have to get used to. I go for another shot, and I hit the cannon barrel. I'm starting to get a little bit tilted, if you will, here. But that's okay, because he's just staring at me as if, as if his internet connection broke. And then he realizes, hey, maybe I should get out of here, and then I finally put one into the turret, ending the little fiasco with the BT-7. It does get better from here, though, and that's pretty much a fairly accurate summary of how the Swedish tech tree goes. It starts off pretty miserable, to be honest, and then it just gets better. It slowly gets better and better. M10, easy. absolutely smashed into a million pieces. And that's because the APHE, the APCBC, whatever you'd like to call it, is a really, really good shell. Again, I'm looking back behind me because I see some traces heading across that top layer there, and you can see I'm basically trying to find out where they're coming from. I'm looking at the tracer fire, and then I see this T-34. Stupidly, I go back into cover and come back out just in time to finish the T-34 before he gets to take aim. That would have finished me quite easily, considering that the T-34, even the 57mm variant, has a fairly powerful punch, especially when you're dealing with little amounts of armor. Now, this Panzer IV and the other friendly up in the smoke are having a little bit of trouble with a few opponents, and I'm going to see if I can back them up. This is basically how you play the PvKv2. You simply wait for an opportunity, as a tank destroyer probably should. You sort of wait for someone to come out in front of you and work in ambush positions. That doesn't mean sit at the back of the map and camp, because the muzzle velocity of this gun is not good enough to really make the most of sitting at the back at long range. What you need to be doing is sitting in the flanks, or sitting close to where your enemies might come out from. You can't really afford to be at 1.5 kilometers because you'll very, very rarely get a hit. You need to be within, say, 600 meters, 700 meters, and low tier, the maps are really good for that. But at higher tiers, it would probably fall flat. Some sort of Sherman, M4A1, managed to put one into the side, and very, very easy kill. You see, if your opponents aren't looking, and you have the APCBC shell, this tank is phenomenal. It is amazing fun. And it is a really, really good 3.3, kind of like the Panzer IV F2. I would actually put it in line with a Panzer IV or a T-34 when spaded. When stock, it is stressful, to say the least. But get those upgrades, and trust me, you will have a really, really good time. Speaking of really, really good time, I'm sorry, little one, ASU 57 has to go. Hull broken with the APCBC shell. Now, you can see that I don't take too many rounds in this particular tank, and that's quite simple. I don't think you end up living that long in this tank because of how light it is. Not only that, but because you should be playing around cap circles, you shouldn't really need to be taking any more than 15 to 20 shells anyway. If you can avoid taking ammo in your turret or in your hull, then that means you have a bit more survivability up your sleeve. And that's really, really important for a tank that doesn't have any armor. So, now that my team is advancing, I decide that I might advance too, but not until I see those two tanks go down on the minimap just to the south of me. This indicates that the enemies are going to push up. So I need to sit in an ambush position, and there's a Chaffee. Chaffee gets taken out. Very simple. It is a weak tank from the side, and I managed to take it out fairly easily. But I did see that two tanks went down at the same time, so I'm not quite convinced that that Chaffee was the only one that was advancing. So maybe I should be waiting a little bit. Maybe I should. But then that tank gets lit up right beside my ally there in the SAV. So maybe I should push. Maybe I should be proactive. I'm hesitating because I don't have many crew left. And I'm starting to run a little bit low on like will to live, if you will. Also, ammunition isn't exactly plentiful, which was kind of my fault. Maybe I should take 20 shells instead of 15. And that's probably what I would recommend. Take 20. So, as the SAV pushes up, I would assume that it is perfectly fine. So what I'm going to do is check the north of me, just to make sure that there's no one camping out there, or making sure that no one's going for a flank just outside the town, before I push up towards B and try and find something else to shoot at. And B just starts to get capped. What I need to do now is wait for that opponent to show itself. The hostile team has stopped, which means that there is some sort of engagement between my teammates and this enemy tank, which possibly means that if he decides to go for a flank, he could end up flanking out around, exposing himself. I decide that maybe I can intercept that flank out from this side, and unfortunately, I don't get that opportunity to. The game ends, and I get a nice little match to sort of finish things out. This is probably how you play most of the Swedish tanks, in a sort of ambush type position, and it does work and it can be fun, but it's not for the faint-hearted. Anyway, ladies and gents, I hope you're also enjoying the Swedish tech tree. Stay safe from Corona, take care, and I'll catch you next time.